I'm gonna sit right here.
There we go.
Tell me when we're. Right now the mics are hot, so everybody can hear what you're saying. FYI. He started before I had a chance to say that. Welcome to the second episode of Sour Sofkee. Here in the Indian living room, we have Ruth Bible, who is a, what would you say, community fixture?
Yes.
Long-term Indian?
Lifetime.
Yeah, lifetime Indian. And we also have Eli Grayson. What would you say about the Grayson lineage? Like a tribal fixture or a political pillar of the history of the tribe?
The Grayson name has been in the tribe just a few years longer than this couch that they're sitting on.
Already,
Okay.
we're going to go on the couch.
This is so
Fine.
embarrassing. Okay, for the public out
Tell
there,
them what you...
we got $400 million in a permanent fund, and we can't take out a few extra dollars of that to get a proper set. We're sitting in a room that looks like the Roseanne Barr show from the 1980s, the first
Yes.
episode.
Yes.
So that's the first thing. I just
So
can't get
you-
behind
you
that. And to all of my former clients and
Yeah.
friends in California that may see this, I walked in on this.
Yeah.
This is not me. I had nothing
For
to do
the,
with this.
for the people in the audience that don't know your profession, sir, could
I
you
was a
give them...
former interior designer before I retired. However, I retained my taste, and this is ridiculous. And I can't even cuss on this show.
Yeah.
So,
And I appreciate the fact that you're holding that back.
Yeah,
I
and-
know it's like a dam, it's like a tidal wave just waiting to crash.
and the guy with the Oral Roberts shirt on there is kind of reminding me. So anyway,
The reason I wanted to have you guys on is for twofold. I know that during festival there was the film festival that you're affiliated with, and you guys had called the week of, and we were trying to work out some way to get coverage of it, and we couldn't do it. This is on Muscogee Vision, the TV program. But I thought this might be a good avenue for you to come in and kind of talk about like how you got involved in the Native Film Festival and what it is and what the plans for the future are and everything like that. So how did that get kicked off for you?
They had a showcase in April, and I went attended. The founder, Celia Xavier, she was married to a Creek, Sherwood Ball, and that's how I met her, and with California Mvskoke Creek Association. And she's been doing this festival since 2015, and so we ran into each other again over the few years and stuff. So I went to the one in April, and it was a good, it's more than a festival. It's workshops, different workshops or different things. And she's premiering movies that haven't come out yet.
Yeah, right. I think that I spoke to her on the phone during that period
Yes.
when we were trying to work
Yes.
that out. These are first-run films. This isn't like films that have been out anywhere. They're the first run. And also, she had Gray Eyes, the actor,
Michael Gray Eyes.
come in and give a talk. That's the thing that we were I was talking to her about was trying to get that closer to the rest of the main festival stuff. So that because that's the only drawback about the film festival is it's at the Circle Cinema. So
yeah, it'd be great to have it at John McDonald's
The
place.
Orpheum.
at
the Orpheum. Yeah.
Yeah.
Recently they had they ran a story in the local paper that was about that was going to close down. Now, and I don't know that the rumors were that it was something that had to do with his taxes. He said he made a post, I think it was on his Facebook page, that said it was going to reopen, but I don't know if that's been confirmed or not on Facebook.
I talked to him. It wasn't
okay.
about that at all.
What?
It was just losing money, and he had been investing money in it for years.
Yeah.
And it hadn't shown a profit. And so he was paying salaries and things like that out of his pocket. And it's one of those things where the community wasn't appreciating what they had. They had a gym in the city, and people were driving to Tulsa to see the movies instead of staying locally and using his facility. So he was just losing money. So that's, you know, you get to a point where if you're not making money, you just kind of go like that. That's what that was.
What is his? Do you know what his game plan is now?
He's going to keep it open. He said,
Okay.
I saw him yesterday. He said he plans on keeping it open, and I do hope that he would host, you know, you guys' film festival and other stuff.
Yeah. Because he does. That's a first-run theater there too. And that's what I was talking to her about. Is, you know, and that theater is.
But it's just not that. He has an acting school there.
Yes, Miss. I forgot the lady's name. My daughter was signed up with that, so they go on the stage and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It needs some renovation, but it's not anything out of the realm of possibility. You know, and it's something that's been in Okmulgee, or it's been like one of the major draws in Okmulgee for a long time. You know, like that movie theater was really big when I was a kid. I went to so many movies at the first time to see them at that theater, you know, and it has such an ambiance and everything. You know, I saw one year they had the Rocky Horror Picture Show come through town, you know, like the one with the actors on the stage and the toast and all of that stuff. And I went to one of those there and got a shirt there. And that's not something you could just do anywhere. That's normally something you would see in a major metropolitan area like Tulsa or something. You would go to one of those, but in a small town, you don't, like, that's very rare. So. But the Native Film Fest. Do you know anything about, like, next year, what's going to happen with the game plan?
For Native American Month, she's got some plans in the works right now.
And that's November?
Yes, and this past November 2017, she had Hostiles, and this is before it even came out. Chris Eyre was there, Jolie Proudfoot, Wes Studi.
Wow.
They were all there, and so they had a Q&A at the end, and you know, we got to see it before it even, like 2 months before it showed.
That is amazing.
And so that was in November 2017, and then in April she had The Rider and Indian Horse, which, you know, those were, you know.
Yeah, big.
And
big
The Rider, I just received my copy in the mail today. The Rider, it's
awesome.
about a young man that's in a rodeo, and he had an accident, and he couldn't do it. One of his best friends had an accident also. It's a good movie.
And that's going to be showing in November?
No, this was in April.
In April.
Yeah, this past April.
So we should probably let the audience know that now. Where would they go to buy advance tickets or anything for the Circus Cinema shows? That
we're on Facebook. Yeah, we do everything.
Yeah.
We tweet, Snap, Facebook. You know.
What is the Facebook for the audience?
It's Tribal Film Festival.
Okay.
So
if you go on Tribal Film, or if you go on Facebook and you search for Tribal Film Festival, it should come up. If you search for Ruth Bible in association with that, it should come up. Those types of things, you know, that is, the Tribal Film Fest really, you don't often see ones that do first-run movies. That's the thing with that. And then I know that Cecilia, or is it Celia? Celia. It has the tribal.tv in addition to that she runs, which is, you know, like that's a big deal in and of itself. So in the future, you know, when I was speaking to her on the phone, that's one of the things I was saying to her is, you know, we would love to promote it and get involved, you know, like with you guys. We just need more runtime, and that's one of the things what we would try to do is like, and also with having the actors from the films, if we could get interviews with them and stuff, it would be awesome. You know, it would help the Muscogee Vision program out a whole lot too. So we appreciate, or I appreciate you coming down and being on the show. This is the second episode, so I'm still trying to wrangle guests. By the way, if you want to be on this program and you're a Creek citizen and talk about whatever you want to talk about, Kevin, could you pop the email up so they can get a look at where to send your email? Just shoot an email to jmoore@muscogeemedia.com, and I'll get you slotted in on one of the coming week's show. While I'm talking about the future, next week, a friend of mine, you know Tate Steinzik. I don't know if you know him. Or you might know, did you know Tommy Steinzik? Anyway.
Sounds familiar.
Tate is a special effects artist. He's a Creek. His mother actually did a lot of artwork. If you watch our channel and you see the archives that we do that are about Creek folklore and things like that, a lot of times you will see the name Tommy Steinzik. She did the artwork for a lot of those things, the paintings. That's his mom. Now, he got involved in special effects, and he's already worked in a lot of movies, and he is also opening a special effects film studio in Tulsa, and he's working on a lot of projects coming up here in the area in the future. I've tentatively got him scheduled to come on the show next week. I have another friend of mine who also does special effects, but he does more like haunted house stuff. So he worked in OKC at the big haunted house they have there, and he designs the mazes, and he can also go in. His name is Eric Salisbury, and he's a Choctaw. He's not Creek, but there are two spectrums of that same type of these. It would be interesting to have you on the show with them, because I know we've talked about art before. These guys can go in and make anything look like anything. It's really crazy. So we'll see if I can get them to come in next week. I haven't got it fixed down. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is we've been doing a lot of coverage over the Freedmen issue. And one of the things that's come up with that is the history of the Graysons and how Graysons were involved in the tribe around the 1866 treaty, and even after and before, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to see if you knew any history or anything that you could share about, like, the history of the Graysons or anything like that, you know?
Well, I mean, there's 4 or 5 different families of Graysons in the Creek Nation, and they're not related.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you have a family who, where the name came from, which was Grierson, not Grayson, and it was about the 1820s it had evolved into Grayson. He married an Indian woman and had a bunch of kids, but he was a slaver.
I see.
He was from Scotland, he and several of his brothers. And there were other Indian families that adopted the name. And then there's these, like most people who were enslaved didn't have last names, they only had first names. So after they were emancipated after the Civil War, they adopted their master's names. So you have a lot of Grayson families where the name was adopted, and then you have this one particular family where the name actually comes from. So, but the Graysons were not the only slavers, and Obethely Yahola was a slaver. You know, we forget about that. Matter of fact, he was one of the richest Indians of that time because of his number of African slaves. If you look on the Dawes Rolls and look at the actual census cards and go through them, you see Old Gouge or Obethely Yahola. If you look at the testimonies of former slaves during the 1930s when they were being interviewed, there were several of them, like Lucinda Davis, that talked about being a slave of Obethely Yahola. But at the same time, you know, you had the McIntoshes, the Perrimans. I mean, you could just go on and on and on. So you had white Indian families, and then you had black Indian families that owned African slaves.
Right.
So the Freedmen issue, and the reason I have stuck with it for 20 years is because I think it's the right thing to do. I grew up in Mississippi, you know, and when I was a kid, I remember the Negro and white drinking fountains. That's still vivid in my mind. Why, you know, and no one could tell me why that was there, because, you know, and as soon as I began to grow up, it disappeared. But the issue was always, to me, was the Creeks had slaves. They were emancipated in the Treaty of 1866 after the black people in the states were emancipated. The Creek slaves were still enslaved. It wasn't until a treaty, because they were slaves of a foreign government, not the United States.
Right.
They were a foreign government being the Creek Nation. There had to be a treaty to actually free them. And to me, it's like if someone said to me, there's a white governor in the state of Mississippi and in Alabama, Tennessee, or someplace that's now promoting black people in their states lose their citizenship rights because they're not descendant of white people.
Yeah.
You know, we would get it. And
Right.
this is the same issue. Here we are saying to people who, when they were purchased as slaves or captured as slaves, nobody went to the auction block and said, we want this Negro with Indian blood.
Right.
You know, they wanted black people, they wanted Africans to enslave them.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're turning it around and say, well, they can't have citizenship because they don't have Indian blood, when Indian blood wasn't a requirement for them to be enslaved in the first place. So if you read Article 2 of the treaty, it's just as clear as day. A 6-year-old child could read that and understand what the intent was. And it remained so up until 1979, when they decided to rewrite a constitution, got rid of the tribal town governments, because had they not got rid of the tribal town system of governments, 3 of those tribal towns, Arkansas, Canadian, and Arkansas Colored, would be black. Mm-hmm. And so they would be enrolled in the tribe. So that the cleverness of rewriting a constitution, not only removing them of their rights, but ending the tribal town system, is actually an affront to the Indians as well as to the blacks, you mm-hmm. know. So my thing is that if Mississippi can't do it, and the Creeks were not alone in making their enslaved people national or citizens of their, in our case, our nation, our tribe. Mississippi had to make black people citizens of the United States. Mm-hmm. Alabama had to make their black people citizens of the United States. And this was all after a great war had been won. Now, when you think about this, had the Union lost the war and the Confederates won, mm-hmm. and the Confederate Creeks had won, we would still have Africans enslaved in our tribe, and we wouldn't be trying to put them out. We'd be trying to make them a larger product. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It would just, but because it's so appalling to us today and it's such a deplorable issue, also the fact that you have people in 2018 trying to make this decision on a decision that were made by people who lived that time. Many of them gave their lives, their family members gave their lives. Obesity Holla gave his life for this. He died up in Kansas, mm-hmm. you know, doing the right thing. You know, though he was a slaveholder, he took the Creeks up north to avoid this
yep. war.
And he also had freed his enslaved Africans before he did so.
Yeah.
You know, so when you think about it, you got people in today thinking they're so super Creek or super Indian or whatever, that they think that they're the beginning and the end of this tribe, and they're not. I'll tell you right now, you're not. Go sit down. You know, you're not. You know, the fact of it is, the way our government is set up is no different than the way it was set up. And the Dawes, what happened during the Dawes time when the allotments happened is proof about how equality is spread across our tribe. The cutoff date for allotment was April 26, 1906. If you were living between January of 1899 and April 26 of 1906, you got a 160-acre allotment. If you were a child, a baby that was born a month before, in May of 1906, you got 160 acres of land. If you were that woman that's on the Dawes Rolls who's 115 years old in 1900, meaning she was born in 1885, mm-hmm. 75, excuse me, 1875, she got a 160-acre allotment. If you were, you know, Spy Hitcher, who was a chief, you got a 160-acre allotment. Mm-hmm. If that black child, if a black child who was a freedman was born May of 1906 and was just a month old, that black child got a 160-acre allotment. There was equality across the board. There was mm-hmm. no super creeks at all, yeah. like we do today. Yeah. You know, so that's the problem I have, is that when people try to think they're better than other people, and you know, we're living in a time where we're seeing white supremacy rise and the N-word being thrown about, mm-hmm. you know, on, and things are kind of gotten easy to be a racist, you know, yet we haven't dealt with our own stuff. So now
well, and that leads to the other part of the Freedman lawsuit, which is the full citizenship issue.
Yeah.
And I know
Well, that's
time,
the whole thing that we started. There was no such thing as full citizenship for anybody until 1979.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. There was no classes of different creeks. You either were creek or you were not. It was two types of people on this planet: creeks and non-creeks.
Right.
To us, you know. So
Well,
now we got different classifications of people.
Last time we had you on the program, that's one of the things was the petition that you were circulating about the blood quantum to run for office issue.
Right, which is it's still part of that stuff of here we are, even without the freedman thing, within the current population of the tribe, you got incredible people that are not allowed to run for office.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name the girl, but there's one girl who's one of the presidents of a major billion-dollar corporation, worldwide corporation. She lives in Los Angeles, and yet she would fall below that blood quantum, yet her stakeholders have made her the chairman of this company, but she can't come back and run this little old tribe.
Yeah.
You know, and other things. There's so many good people that in ideas, we think about, we're stuck with a select group of people. We're actually stuck. Let's just be honest. We're stuck. You know, there's now to the point you get in certain counties or districts where the population of creeks are so low, and then you deal with the blood quantum thing, which is also making it lower. And then you deal with the criminal element, with the felons and all the stuff that we've added to the laws. So the bowl of picking who we can actually choose from has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So when only a few people run, or the same people run each 2 years, we wonder, well, where are other people running? Well, it's because we're not allowing them to run.
Yeah.
So
what is the status of that? Is that, are you guys
we
still?
got enough signatures. We just hadn't filed it.
Okay.
You know, but
are you guys planning on waiting until after this lawsuit?
No, this lawsuit has nothing to do with that.
Okay.
The Freedman lawsuit that was filed, which I hate that it was filed. I mean, it broke my heart that that particular group of freedmen actually filed that case, because there was still opportunity for the Descendants of Freedmen organization, and I know they were doing this. They were in the process of talking to the Interior about interceding on behalf of the Creek Freedmen descendants.
Okay, with the Creek Nation.
With the Creek Nation. And then when that group, which is another group, jumped up and filed a lawsuit, all of a sudden it will now end the talks with the DOI, because the DOI, they're not going to talk to you when they're being sued.
That was, you know, we had wondered about that, because we had heard in our coverage that there were groups that were opposed to the lawsuit, or that were pro-Freeman.
They weren't opposed to the lawsuit. They were just thought that the group that filed should have waited, and they all should have come together in an agreement that this, because no matter who filed it, it's going to affect all of them.
I see.
You know, and there are some things in there that when I read the lawsuit, I would have actually done differently. One, that group should have approached our chief and just sit down and talk. Hey, how could we work this out? And if nothing worked out then go to the DOI and say, listen, in the Cherokee Freedman case, the Van case, and the Nash case in the Cherokee Nation, the DOI got on the side of the Cherokee Freedmen and sued the Cherokee Nation, and in the end, the treaty upheld. And by the way, that treaty that was upheld for the Cherokee, we say, well, the Freedmen won their treaty rights, and it was upheld in the Cherokee Nation case. You got to think about it like this. You had a federal court actually confirming the 1866 treaty. So when the Cherokee Nation went yes, they went yes for a reason. That means that they had a federal court that actually said, yes, their 1866 treaty is valid, it's intact, it's livable, it's a living, breathing thing. It didn't die at statehood. So though it was, I think, Article 6 in their treaty that dealt with their enslaved people that they were dealing with, it was confirmed. And so in the Creek freedman case, descendant case, and I have to say descendant to people because there are no freedmen living. Okay, you have to be a slave and then freed, and that was a freedman. People today are descendants of those people. And the reason folks don't understand it, in Mississippi, in Alabama, in Arkansas, on and on, there was a time up until the 1930s that there were buildings called the Freedmen Bureau. And it dealt with their freed black people in those states. So you had words that were very common in those days: a Mississippi freedman, a Alabama freedman, a Georgia freedman, a Tennessee freedman. And in our case, you had a Creek freedman. Now, what's terrible about this history is that after 150 years, we're still using an antiquated word that should have gone out in style with the Mississippi Freedmen Bureau.
Right.
But we use it because we kicked these people out, and now we have to go back and look at a treaty that's 152 years old. Just like when they have issues about the 13th and 14th Amendment, they have to go back and look at those things. We have to go back and look at, this is what happened. We had slaves. There was a war. Our tribe split in half, just like the Union and the Confederates. The Confederates lost. So there was conditions for losing. And in the Creek Nation, we lost 2/3 of our land. We had a whole bunch of people die, number one, within our tribe. And then the government came back and said, okay, if you want to exist as a tribe, because they could have terminated us and just moved in and made us a state, they said, this is what your treaty is going to be. So they dealt with land issues, but before they dealt with that, they dealt with the enslaved people, which is what the Civil War was about. And they said, okay, they were your property, now they're your citizens. Now, why are we talking about this 152 years later? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, and let's just call it what it is. It's racist. And the people that want to say, well, they want to be just like us. Well, I've seen some of those people you film that say that. No, they don't want to be like you. They want to have creditors looking for you. So let's stop that. These people just want to be themselves, but they have a right to be who they are. And it also goes to the fact that there are 4,000 or 5,000 creeks today. We're all different. Every one of us are very different. We are different religions. You know what we have in common? The most traditional thing that creeks do. I just did it. I stopped by Walmart. I just did it. That's the most traditional thing that all of us do together. We all go to Walmart. If you live here in Okmulgee County or Tulsa County, if you're Creek, I can guarantee you go to Walmart.
Yeah.
That's the most traditional thing we do. But we pick at other stuff that look Indian, and then I know full-blood Creeks who don't speak the language, who don't go to ceremonial grounds, who battle with their kids, and they live like, if you just remove the image of them and record them, you would think they were a white family in Georgia because they're dealing with the same issue of raising kids, the pressures of schools, all of those things like that we all have in common. You know, so enough of all this super Creek stuff that you're better than me. I'm not going to give you that power. You know,
Well,
I'm not going to let you tell me I'm less than you, and you think you're going to get away with it without me saying something.
Yeah, and an interesting part of the debate too is the separation between, you know, citizenship as a governmental thing, and then you have this, you know, the ceremonial grounds as a separate.
Yeah, none of these people want to be a member of your ceremonial ground. Matter of fact, if 85,000 creeks and you got 85,000 creeks going to ceremonies, somebody's lying, because that's not what's happening. You got a percentage, a very small percentage of creeks that do that, and I'm glad they're doing it. They're preserving the culture. But let's be honest, 90-some% of creeks don't do that. You know, they do other things. Some of them go to church, some of them don't. Some of them just read books, you know, whatever they do. We all are different, but it doesn't make what you do better than what I do.
Right.
And that's my point. I'm not going to give you that authority. And it goes back to the freedmen. You want them to be Indian, and they're telling you, no, we're fine being black. But that doesn't make us no less Creek than you.
Yeah.
You know, because our nation is, it's just like the United States, with multiple races and multiple cultures and multiple types of people make up Okmulgee, makes up Okmulgee County, makes up Tulsa. Tulsa is a town with multiple different types of people, races, background. The Creek Nation, whether we want to believe it or not, we're the same way. But we try to make it a club image, and we end up looking like KKK people when we do that. You know, that this is some type of super club, and it's actually what's holding us back. You know, and I have to watch myself. You know me, Ruth knows me. I'll say something in a minute about somebody that.
The purpose of this show is so that other citizens can hear, you know, like the audience this is geared towards citizens. So citizens can hear differing viewpoints and hear other citizens, because one of the things is, you know, citizens outside of the area, they don't hear a lot of the stuff that happens down here, or like the viewpoints of people at ceremonial grounds or not at ceremonial grounds, et cetera, et cetera.
And their viewpoints are fine, but put it in perspective, because there's 80,000 creeks.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, there's a lot of citizens out there all over the country, especially in California.
I got a cousin that lives in Germany. I mean, he's just as Creek as I am, and he has that right to be.
Yeah. And that's part of what we try to do is spread that conversation out so that everybody can see the different sides. Because that's one of the things.
You just reminded me of something. We have the Murphy decision lawsuit that's dealing with the treaty in the U.S. Supreme Court. And there we're screaming up and down, Trump, in your Supreme Court, our treaty is still valid. And then yet, with this issue in Article 2 of the same treaty dealing with people, it's the same thing. The interesting thing about the treaty is this. It's the only language in the whole treaty that gave a Pacific class of people a right to be Creek. Nobody else did. Had the founders, the writers of our Constitution in 1979 said that you can only be a Creek citizen if you're 1/2 blood or more, and placed that in the Constitution, and it passed. Anyone that's not named in the treaty would have lost, because there would be no legal right for them to say, well, here's a treaty that actually protects my right to be Creek. They can't do that to the freedmen, because in Article 2 it specifically named them in there. And folks would say, well, the tribes get to decide their own citizenship status. That's absolutely true for all the tribes in the country except the 5 civilized tribes who had African slaves. They treated away their right to determine who their membership was when it came to that issue, because they enslaved these people. And folks would say, well, it wasn't that bad, or we could have done something different. Where the Creeks could have changed their direction in history on this issue is when they came here to Indian Territory. They came here and freeing their slaves, and there would be no slavery here. That didn't happen. They still enslaved people even after the removal here, and that's why in 1866 there had to be a treaty. Well, in 1860, when the war broke out and the Creeks spread like, you know, fire, they just vacated and went to Kansas and Texas to get out of the way, but there were still battles here. And if you look on the Dawes census cards, one of the most fascinating things you'll see, and saddest thing you'll see, is when you're reading freedmen cards, and it'll bring you to tears if you actually care about history. These people actually would name their parent and then say died in the war. Now, you know they're not talking about the Korean War, you know, World War II, afterwards. They're talking about the Civil War. They actually gave their life to fight for their freedom. And so you got somebody here in 2018 who's an OU fan or OSU fan, you know what I'm saying, to now play Indian and say they don't have a right to be in the tribe, yet you give nothing. I would shut up if the Creek Nation required us to pay income taxes. I wouldn't complain about nothing. If the tribe actually, just like the federal government requires the American citizens to pay federal taxes, and the state of Oklahoma or whoever, whatever state you live in, requires you to pay taxes. We're a tribe that don't require that. So to me, if you're not contributing and your hand is like this, or you're getting a paycheck or something like that, and you're always in line for something, on and on and on, and that's about as much as you do, other than voting, you don't contribute. There's nothing that comes out of your pocket to make this a nation. Nothing. Zero. Nothing. And then you want to talk about somebody else's citizenship? Be willing to pay 3% to 10% of your income taxes to the Creek Nation, and then we can talk.
Yeah.
I can have a decent conversation with you then.
And this is a great conversation we're having. I want to check and see what time we're at, Kevin. How long we're going? Are we getting close to 30 minutes, or have we gone over?
We're past 30.
Oh, how far past are we?
Oh, you can edit. I'm out of here.
Oh, there's no editing. This is all live. Did I not mention that?
No, at least I didn't cuss.
One of the things, or there's a couple of things I want to touch on that we're talking about. One of the things is, you know, you were mentioning things the tribe could have done to head off the issue, or et cetera. And even now, you know, people in the tribe that are in the legal know.
Mm-hmm.
So they worry because they say, hey, you know, this lawsuit, if a federal court or the mini Supreme Court decides in favor of the freedmen, so we're going to get decrees handed to us from the federal government saying you guys are going to handle your citizenship like X, and there could be detrimental things within that. Well, I don't know, but this isn't my viewpoint. This is just
I know, and it's just crap. And let me tell you something. As soon as you said it was an attorney, they get paid to cause controversy.
They do.
The Cherokee Nation spent so much money on attorneys fighting Maryland Van.
Sure.
And they still lost.
Yeah.
But guess what? Those attorneys got paid, regardless of the fact that they created this issue.
They did get paid.
And so when you got attorneys saying, well, the world is going to fall down and the moon's going to fall out of the sky and this and that and that and that, if you don't pay me to fight this, that's what this is about.
And before that ever happens, though, like we were talking about things.
They should have talked because the law was already there. We didn't have to write any new law. The fact of it is the Cherokee Nation Constitution is in violation of their treaty. But guess what? They're enrolling their members. They know they can't not enroll their citizens.
Right.
So they do. Now they fix whatever they need to do.
Well, even right now, the tribe, any councilman could propose an amendment. Citizens could do initiative petition. We could get an amendment passed that would solve both of those problems.
Well, here's the problem with the voting thing. We didn't have a right to vote on the treaty. Okay, so you making a vote on somebody's citizenship that was established in the treaty is just as wrong as what they did in 1979. They didn't have a right to vote on that issue. That issue was a settled issue. It should have just been in the Constitution. The descendants of those people are going to be enrolled because here's a bona fide treaty that we signed with the federal government. And without this treaty, we don't have a right to exist. The bottom line is that treaty established our boundaries that we still recognize. Ain't nobody going back to Alabama claiming nothing, or claiming Oklahoma City, which would have been in our tribe too, because it was that area went all the way up to the Texas Panhandle before we lost it. So why aren't we claiming that if the treaty doesn't matter? The bottom line is that treaty is the only document that we have to keep Trump, anybody else, Obama, any president, on and on, at bay when they came to the door. Instead of picking up machine guns, we pick up the treaty, which is the fact. And how many times have we went to federal court claiming this treaty in recent years, again and again and again? But when it came to that one issue, because we're dealing with black folk, we say, oh, it don't matter. Well, that's racism. Let's just call it what it is. You can go to your churches and pray all you want to, which is very interesting because if you read your Bible, the Christians are adopted children of God. They're not Jews. You know, the Jews were the original kids of God. Anybody after that became adopted children of God. So it's the same concept. You know, even our, you know, the Creeks are adopted citizens of the United States. We got our citizenship in the 5 Civilized Tribes Citizenship Act. What is it, 1901 or 1902 or 3 or something like that? That's when our ancestors became American citizens, you know. So our citizenship is based on adoption, not just, if you want to go back to that point.
Yeah.
So have we not done any of this ridiculous crap of kicking people out and dividing people up with blood quantums and that nonsense? What would have happened? It would have just been birth. Your parent was a Creek, you're a Creek. And therefore it went on, a descendancy thing. Like it is being a citizen of the United States. You're a citizen of the U.S. because your dad is, or your parents are citizens of the U.S.
Well, let me ask you this. I don't know how far we're going to go, guys, but let me ask you this. This is a radical idea, and this is something that I always talk about, is naturalization. What do you think about that? Should the Creek Nation have a method to create naturalized citizens? And if so, what? No, of Creek Nation.
Well, we do. We use our Constitution to do it. We nationalize people based on
even
the God's roads.
Yeah, even the 1866 treaty, there were, and supposedly I had heard that there was even people that weren't tribal members in Okmulgee that got adopted in the tribe in 1902 or something like that. Supposedly.
If you read Article 2 and you read it line by line, what it says also, and may adopt.
Okay.
According to their laws and uses of the land. So the treaty actually gives us a right to adopt anybody we want to, not just the freedmen who had a legal right because of their enslavement, their ancestors being enslaved in the tribe. But it also talks about free blacks who were not enslaved as well. So if the bottom line, we could do what we, it's
because the United States has a naturalization process. And
yeah,
they have a test you can take and become a naturalized citizen.
We pass up some of the most incredible people that would benefit our tribe based on stuff. Now that's a whole nother issue that if somebody wants to deal with that and run with that ball.
The naturalization thing is kind of extreme. It occurred to me a long time ago because when you go to festivals or when you go to places, there are people that love the tribe. They learn the language and they learn the customs and all of that stuff.
Yeah, when you go to other countries, that's what you do. My cousin that lives in Germany, I don't think he speaks English anymore. I mean, he learned the Deutsch language, and his kids, you met the young one that came over and he didn't speak English, and he actually picked up Creek faster than he was picking up English. His dad is Creek, but his mom is a white lady from England. He grew up in England. He's going to stay in England. He's never going to come back here. But that's what nations do. I think there's a lot of the image that we have of the Creek Nation, unfortunately, and where I think, this is my personal opinion, where we're stuck, we are stuck on tribe. And the Chickasaw Nation, now the Cherokee Nation and others, they moved into a nation status. And ironically, when you read the testimonies, it's called The Conditions of Indians in Indian Territory back in 1879 and again in 1884.
Yeah, the Congress order.
The members of the Senate came to Indian Territory and they had a hearing on the conditions of these people. Now, they would get people up there, those that spoke Creek only and those that had a mixed English break, but they had interpreters. And one of the questions that they would ask every individual Creek that sat there in that chair was, what is your nationality? They didn't say what tribe you was from. They didn't say how much Indian you are, how much Negro you were, none of that. They said, what's your nationality? So people who were former slaves that were now sitting on our just Supreme Court, or members of our light horse that they interviewed, or on our council, they would say, what's your nationality? They said, Creek. I'm a Creek national. And they understood it. We've lost that because we have been brainwashed into 100 years of Jim Crow Oklahoma, where Oklahomans have gotten us thinking we're part something and still something. The power of our sovereignty is wakening up to what it actually is, which is nationhood, basically. We're still at the tribal level. I'm pushing, and I hope they actually, and I know the council has been meeting on this, which is to establish a Muscogee Creek Nation embassy in Washington, D.C., like the Chickasaws had with the Pushmataha
Yeah.
House with Charles Blackwell. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And we got somebody who's in D.C., who's been in a prominent position of D.C., I'm not going to say his name, who's a insider both in the with Republicans and Democrats, who could do amazing things for us. But we need an embassy. And it doesn't need to be somebody we just hire and they go to office and work. We need a house there with bedrooms at the top and a office there and a courtyard where we can host events and meetings and things like that. And when you walk your butt on that property, you're on Creek Nation land. Just like if I go to an embassy there, if I try to set my foot on the Russian embassy, I know I'm on the Russian laws at that point.
Right.
You know, so why can't we have the same thing? We're a nation, so why can't we start thinking out of the box or out of the Jim Crow box, which is really what got us confined into this small way of thinking that, you know, everything we do has to be hidden in the woods. You know,
I think that is an interesting idea, and it would be interesting to see how far it goes. You know,
I hope it goes. And if you're a council member and you're watching this, you got to make that happen. If you're going to think about our kids 10 years from now, Ruth's grandkids, Ileana, I mean, all these people 20, 30 years from now, you got to make that embassy happen, because whenever we send someone to D.C., they need to know that, oh, wow, look, that's the Creek Nation embassy right there. I'm a tribal member. I can go there when I'm in trouble or go there and get information instead of going to a museum or going to the NCAI, which don't give a crap about us in the first place. Yeah. So,
well, on that note.
Well, they don't know.
Where are we at now, Kevin?
We're at 50 minutes.
All right. Well, we have gone 20 minutes over what the show was slated to be, but it was a great conversation.
Yeah.
You guys are welcome to come back anytime.
I'm going to come back and decorate this place. I mean, I feel offended that I've been invited to this sofa, folks, is so old that the term used back in 1971 when it was probably made was Oriental. We don't even use that word no more. It's like Freedman. We shouldn't be using that word. This is I don't know where you dug this couch at, brother.
Well, just to be fair,
that ain't fair.
I did send Ruth a link to the previous episode, and she could have tipped you off of what it was going to look like.
I would have never seen this. You have to come see this in person. Well, it could become a nice fixture. The colors are a little bit wrong. That doesn't go with this. It does go with the floor. We can bring Teddy and Cedar in here.
Well, you're welcome to contribute whatever you want to contribute.
Yeah, we need to.
We're on a fixed budget here.
Almost $500 million in our savings, and this is what our media room looks like. You know, I'm not going to say anything disparaging about the Seminoles, but for a minute there,
please don't. Please.
You know, I was like, oh my God, but help. Put this on the corner free.
We need to start a citizen petition.
GoFundMe.
Yeah,
a
GoFundMe. There you go.
On Facebook.
We can't do it, but any citizen can do it.
And we can all contribute some money to do a correct studio. Yeah. I'll help design. I would do it free of charge.
Awesome.
And
well, we might take you up
this.
on that. We might take you up on
all right. Well, we'll see.
Well, we're going to wrap up, and next week, I mentioned the guests I might have. I don't know what we're going to do. And then the week after that, I don't know. So we're going to find out. If you want to be on this program, there's the email. Shoot me an email. We'll schedule it. You know what time the show happens?
I encourage you to invite Freedman Descendants here to talk about.
We actually are in contact with some people that have posted on our YouTube channel.
Yeah,
and I'm trying to get it scheduled.
And they go,
Ron Graham is coming in.
Yeah, and they go talking about 1866 and 1906. That's not when the racism happened. The racism happened in 1979. These people were citizens up until 1979. So getting stuck into a conversation of 1866 or the Dawes Roll in 1906 is unfair, because if you would dig up their ancestors and say, are you Creek? They'd say, yeah. Now, after 1979 is when the mess happened, and the people who did that